Maid Susie brought a hangover remedy to the drunk Governor James, but he forcibly embraced her. He ripped off her clothes, and they had a one-night affair. Afterward, he kissed the butterfly tattoo on her shoulder, but she hurriedly escaped back to her room. She was originally a wealthy young lady named Mary, but years ago her family was slaughtered, and both of her parents were killed. While crying by her mother's corpse, she discovered that her mother was holding onto a button. In order to uncover the truth and find the murderer, she disguised herself as a maid and infiltrated the governor's mansion. After the one-night affair, to avoid being recognized by the governor, she stabbed her own shoulder with a hairpin. The next morning, James woke up not remembering who he had slept with, so he summoned all the maids to identify the woman one by one. He thought Susie looked familiar, but discovered she was still a virgin. Maid Rose, fearing that her affair with the male steward would be exposed, falsely claimed that she was the woman James had slept with the previous night. As a result, he took her as a concubine and allowed her to choose one maid to serve her exclusively. Rose, worried that Susie would expose her lie, deliberately chose Susie as her personal maid. James still had doubts about Rose, so he drugged her to knock her out, then pulled down her shoulder to examine it. He didn't see the butterfly tattoo on her shoulder, so he realized she was an imposter. Enraged, he kicked her and left. He ordered Susie, who was outside the room, to come in and scrub his back. Suddenly, he stood up from the bathtub and embraced her waist, but she quickly turned around and ran away. The next morning, Rose deliberately tripped Susie, causing her to spill hot tea. James' mother was furious and ordered her maid to slap Susie hard twice. Just then, James arrived. Susie was in pain, and he secretly handed her some medicine for the injury. Rose wore a smug expression, but Susie suddenly picked up a hairpin and aimed it at Rose's neck. She warned Rose not to push her luck, or she would expose Rose's affair with the male servant. While Susie was tending to her shoulder wound, Rose happened to walk in. Remembering that James had once asked her about the butterfly tattoo, Rose began to suspect that Susie was the one who had slept with James that night. As soon as the male butler saw Rose, he couldn't help but embrace her and kiss her. Rose handed him a package of jewelry and instructed him to frame Susie and have her expelled from the house. Soon after, Susie was falsely accused of theft and attempting to elope with a male servant. A male servant lied, claiming that he had slept with her and knew about the scar on her shoulder. James' mother ordered Susie's clothes to be torn off, but Susie revealed that the underwear found with the jewelry was not hers, it was Rose's, as it had Rose's name embroidered on it. It turned out that Susie had long suspected that Rose and the male butler were conspiring to frame her, so she had secretly prepared the underwear and placed it next to the jewelry. However, James' mother believed Susie was slandering Rose and ordered the male butler to whip Susie as punishment. She was brutally whipped 20 times and then thrown out of the house. Lying in the snow, she thought she was about to die, but just then, James appeared with an umbrella and walked toward her. He helped the nearly lifeless Susie up and noticed the scar on her shoulder, leading him to suspect that she was the woman he had slept with that night. Susie woke up from a nightmare and realized she was lying next to James. He asked her about the scar on her shoulder, but she lied, saying it wasn't a tattoo but a whip mark. Rose, in order to impersonate Susie, had also gotten a butterfly tattoo on her shoulder. James asked why he hadn't seen her tattoo before. She said her tattoo was made with a special material that wasn't visible most of the time and only appeared when she was emotionally charged. However, James was still somewhat skeptical. He pulled Susie into the room, pulled off her clothes, and checked the scar on her shoulder again. He noticed the scar had started to show some butterfly outlines. Hearing Susie sobbing, he felt a pang of sympathy and didn't press her any further. James's mother, upon hearing that he was interested in Susie, deliberately bullied her and locked her in the woodshed. As Susie tried to escape through the window, she bumped into James's younger brother, David. David immediately recognized her as Mary, a former classmate from their time studying abroad a few years ago, but she pretended not to know him and hurriedly left. After learning that she had been badly beaten in the past, David went to her room to check on her. He told her that he was a doctor and insisted on treating her wounds. When Rose found out that Susie and David had become close, she deliberately informed David's mother. His mother then ordered Susie to kneel and had someone slap her across the face. David tried to protect Susie, but was stopped by the male butler. Just then, James arrived, picked Susie up, and carried her away. Seeing that his brother was treating her wounds, James felt a pang of jealousy and ordered David to leave. Later, he personally took over the task of applying her medicine. Susie was locked in the study by the old lady to clean, and David brought her food, helping her clean as well. She recalled an incident from years ago abroad, when she accidentally bumped into him at the library entrance, and he helped her pick up the books that had fallen to the ground. James, concerned that Susie might be hungry, also brought her food, but caught her in a close moment with David. He accused Susie of seducing his brother and angrily left. However, not long after he left, Susie was drugged, feeling a sudden heat spreading through her body, and a man slowly approached her. Rose informed the old lady that Susie was having an affair with a servant in the study. Enraged, the old lady barged into the study, only to find her son James, shirtless, holding Susie in his arms. James had turned back because he was worried Susie might be hungry, but he happened to catch a man trying to harass her. He punched the man and discovered that she had been drugged. He carried Susie to his bed, where she kissed his Adam's apple, and they began kissing passionately. Just then, David burst in and confronted his brother, asking what he had done to Susie. When David realized she had been drugged, he became even angrier and tried to take her away, but James stopped him. James declared that Susie was his woman and kicked his brother out. Later, in a fit of jealousy, he kissed Susie on the bed. Susie woke up and realized she had slept with James again. James held her chin and kissed her again, telling her that she was his woman from now on and asking her to move in with him. Rose was pregnant with the butler's child. To prevent James from becoming suspicious, she decided to seduce him into bed. She secretly drugged James and wrapped her arms around his neck. Although he saw through her scheme and knocked her unconscious, he lost control when he saw Susie and carried her to the bed. The next morning, James gripped Susie's chin and asked if she was the woman who had a one-night stand with him that night. She admitted it, but he believed that the man she truly loved was David. He then reminded her that she could only belong to him. When James learned that it was Rose who had sent someone to the study to assault Susie, he decided to interrogate her personally. However, upon entering her room, he found that she had hanged herself, with a suicide note lying on the floor. But James discovered that she had actually been strangled and that her death had been staged as a hanging. Meanwhile, David received a mysterious letter, and he appeared deeply concerned. Anna, the governor's fiancée, returned to the country, but he remained cold toward her because he cared more about his maid, Susie. Then James hugged Susie from behind and asked why she hadn't spoken to him. She tried to pull away, but he held her waist and made her sit on his lap. At that moment, Anna entered and handed him a cup of tea. Susie had hidden behind the wardrobe. Anna was about to leave when she heard a noise from the wardrobe. She wanted to investigate, but James stopped her, claiming it was just a wild cat and didn't matter. Anna suspected Susie was seducing James and decided to teach her a lesson. Susie secretly met her adopted brother Bruce at a hotel. Bruce was worried about her situation, but she insisted on staying at the governor's mansion to continue her investigation. Suddenly, James burst into the room. Someone told him that Susie was meeting a man at the hotel, and he believed it. Angrily, he picked up a gun and demanded to know who she was meeting. To protect her brother, Susie denied that anyone else was in the room. She claimed she was planning to run away and even intended to jump from the building. James panicked, pulled her up, and in the struggle, threw her onto the bed and kissed her forcefully. One day, while James was distracted, Susie was pushed down the stairs. She bled heavily from the back of her head and passed out. James fed her some medicine with his mouth. She suddenly woke up, slapped him, and asked who he was. Due to the blow to her head, Susie lost her memory. To prevent her from escaping, James pulled her into his arms and cuffed her to himself. Anna saw them leaving together, hand in hand in a rickshaw, and became extremely jealous. After returning to the mansion, Anna's bullying of Susie intensified, even slapping her. Just as she was about to slap Susie again, James stopped her. He told Anna he was breaking off their engagement because he didn't love her. She had only been his fiancée because of family interests. He added that the woman he wanted to marry was Susie. That night, Susie brought James a bowl of chicken soup, but he seized the opportunity to pull her onto the desk and kiss her. Anna returned home and threw a tantrum, telling her father about everything that happened. Her father, the general and James's superior, was upset with James's behavior, but he comforted his daughter, promising to find her a more powerful husband. He already had a suitable candidate, Bruce, the leader of a new gang whose power rivaled James's, as his gang had accumulated a large stock of weapons. Anna's father teamed up with Bruce, planning to set a trap to kill James. James's mansion was attacked by assassins. His third brother tried to fight them off but was killed by David with a knife. It turned out that David was actually an imposter, Bruce in disguise. Amid the chaos, Susie hid in a wardrobe and began to recover some of her memories, recalling the night her family was murdered. An assassin opened the wardrobe, preparing to kill her, but Bruce arrived just in time to save her. He grabbed her hand and escaped, only to bump into James, who had just returned home. James demanded that Susie come to his side, but Bruce refused to let her go. An assassin lying on the ground raised his gun at James, but Susie rushed forward and took the bullet for him. After she woke up, James asked why she protected him, and she admitted she had unknowingly fallen in love with him. He kissed her deeply, and Bruce witnessed the entire scene. He was very jealous and decided to accelerate his revenge plan to win her back. James discovered Susie's true identity. She was Mary, the daughter of a wealthy family that had been wiped out years ago. When James was a child, he fell into the water, and it was Mary who saved him. As he watched her shower, he tenderly kissed the tattoo on her shoulder. He then carried her to the bed and kissed her passionately. This time, he was determined not to lose her. The next day, while Anna and Bruce were on a date, they ran into Susie. Anna publicly humiliated her, but Bruce reprimanded Anna for her rudeness. Furious, Anna believed that Susie had been deliberately stealing her men and pushed her. Bruce kicked Anna and then checked on Susie. At that moment, James arrived, decided to imprison Anna, and carried Susie away. Bruce noticed the blood on his hands and realized Susie's head was injured again. He rushed back to the governor's mansion, continuing to pretend to be David to treat her injuries. After this head injury, Susie's memory was fully restored. She felt guilty after realizing that she had fallen in love with the man who had killed her parent. Anna's father learned that his daughter was imprisoned and was furious. He agreed to cooperate with Bruce as long as Bruce promised to marry Anna, giving Bruce command of all his military forces. Susie met her brother again, and he ordered her to steal a confidential document from James. He falsely claimed that James was collaborating with an enemy nation, and if they could obtain the document, they would expose James's crimes and punish him. Susie hesitated and doubted James's guilt, but Bruce reminded her not to be soft-hearted and to prioritize revenge. However, Susie later learned that the plan was risky, as it could allow the enemy nation to acquire weapons and attack the civilians in the city. Susie begged her brother to change the plan, as she believed the innocent people shouldn't have to suffer for revenge, but Bruce was set on his course and refused to listen. Susie and Anna clashed, and during their argument, they knocked over a briefcase from a high shelf. Susie found a human skin mask inside, which was the face of David. She realized that the David she met overseas had actually been killed, and her brother Bruce had used David's face to impersonate him. She cried and confronted Bruce, asking why he was so cruel, but Bruce believed he had done nothing wrong. After an investigation, James also learned of Bruce's evil deeds. He had killed James's two younger brothers. How could such bloodshed go unpunished? Bruce and Anna held an engagement banquet, but Susie overheard Bruce's plan to kill James and Anna's father on that day. She accidentally made a noise, and to prevent her from exposing him, Bruce locked her in a study. Later, Susie found a letter from her father, revealing that her brother Bruce was the one who killed her family. Bruce had mistakenly believed her father was responsible for killing his father, which led him to take revenge on her family. Though her father had long known of Bruce's assassination plan, he chose to adopt Bruce to ease his hatred. Susie picked up a gun and escaped the study. She would not allow Bruce to harm her lover, James. Taking advantage of Bruce's distraction, she shot him in the leg. With nowhere to go, Bruce ignited explosives he had prepared, planning to take them all down with him. But James noticed it in time and saved Susie. His subordinate informed him that the enemy nation had invaded, and he had to head to the front lines. He left Susie a letter, gently kissed her forehead, and then departed. When Susie woke up, she read his letter, which said, "I wish we could be together for a lifetime, but a lifetime is too short." She cried and her tears fell onto the letter. Do you think James will survive and return? Please share your opinion in the comments.